Talk to there?
No, they hung up. I'm doing a film on different animal issues. I'd like to get all sides of the story.
And who do you represent? No, I'm not interested in commenting.
I've sort of been hitting the wall, calling different people.
You'll have to call back.
I don't think so. I'm sorry. I'll transfer you to the doctor.
I was wondering if you might be interested in an interview.
No, I don't think there's a good time for this type of interview. First of all, I'm sorry. Who are you guys?
Would you be willing to give your side of the story?
Are you one of those animal rights organizations? Any comment would have to be cleared with my supervisor. I can't say anything.
First, the struggle dissolves the deceptive facade and reveals basic evils. Before a protest can be approved by responsible leadership, they must answer the following questions. Do we have a just grievance? We first used every form of normal means to eliminate the problem by negotiation, petition, and appropriate appeals to authority. When we embark upon any type of lawbreaking, are we prepared to accept the consequences? No one can scorn nonviolent direct action or civil disobedience without canceling out history.
My name is Shannon Keith, and I'm an animal rights lawyer and making a documentary film on the Animal Liberation Front. I decided to make a documentary film about those people who speak up for the animals and about those people who break the law to help animals, because we've only seen change happen in our society when laws have been broken.
Every social justice movement has been made of people that are willing to sacrifice. That's what's going to make the animal rights movement successful. Direct action is taking action for animals now. A little guy in the south of England had a rabbit farm with about 1,500 rabbits that he sold to vivisection labs.
Very few laws in place to protect the animals that are kept in those places, and the same with laboratories. And when I realised these places existed, I went out looking for them, and I still do, to find cruelty, to expose these places for what they are.
The campaign started on a Sunday, and it ended the following Saturday. Our group went down on Monday. We did our protest, we yelled, we screamed, we held signs, caused a bunch of havoc.
We had regular pickets at the farm to make them aware that we were there and we were going to stay there. We were there for the duration until the farm closed.
Bill Pritchard, the owner of Regal Rabbits, got it into his head that he wasn't going to back down from these grassroots animal rights people. We're just protesters. He put up security fences, cameras, even hired a few guards. The call went out that night that every group in the country had better show up Friday at 7 p.m. Friday at 7 p.m. you saw direct action in animal liberation and work.
I made it my business to do something about it.
At least 75 of us descended upon Regal Rabbits. Everybody donned in complete black from head to toe. It was only 6 p.m., 7 p.m. It was still bright out in the middle of the summer. His security gates were ripped open. The security system he had installed ripped out of the walls. People were banging on his doors, his windows. People were on the top of the rabbit sheds, ripping off the tiling to get those rabbits out. His car was overturned.
Very effective tactics that have been tried and tested over recent years and proved to be effective.
Police cars were zeroing down the road, helicopters overhead, and everybody went running in every different direction. Everybody got away. And the next morning, Saturday morning, Bill Pritchard and Regal Rabbits issued a press release saying, "We're not going to do this. The people that are running the campaign to shut this farm down, come and take every last rabbit from us. We're done." That's animal liberation.
John Feldman. I'm in a band called Goldfinger, who tours a lot, and I also produce bands.
Baby, when I think about you, I think about love.
I signed a band called The Used, Story of the Year, written songs with Good Charlotte.
You and your love.
Do a lot of animal rights activism as well. Writing songs is the kind of most direct way that I have to kind of, use my band as a vehicle to, educate people on animal rights.
I didn't ask you to take me from here. I didn't ask to be broken.
Most of our fans are, 17 to 21, that kind of, they're young. And they go home and have their little dogs and cats that they're part of their families, but then they go and eat bacon and ham and hamburgers and stuff, and they don't make that connection between I pet this one and this one I eat and has the most brutal life you can ever imagine in the factory farm.
So free me. I just want to feel what life should be. I just want enough space to turn around and face the truth.
I feel like because I know this and, I'm not ignorant any longer, that it's my duty to talk about this in my records. And, it's definitely something worth fighting for.
What happened to dignity? Did it go away again? Just like some worn out trend? Will I still defend emotions? What happened to honesty?
I'm not fucking around here, This is about saving lives, and this is what I believe.
I still defend devotion. Don't wanna breathe when I wanna hear about life.
I completely support what the Animal Liberation Front does, as far as rescuing animals from laboratories and from factory farms. The Animal Liberation Front, these people are my heroes that are risking their own freedom, to save lives.
The guidelines were tactical in that we obviously didn't want anyone who was innocent to suffer from what we were doing. And certainly we didn't want animals to suffer from anything we did. So we had to be careful on sort of in that respect. And I think we wanted to create quite a large movement. We wanted a lot of people to take A.L.F action. So we had to have tactic that people in general felt happy with so they could join in.
In the naive first formative years of those small people, they did set up an office, they did have Animal Liberation Front literature and you were able to contact them. But it wasn't long before the police totally shut that down. And ever since then, ever since those small group of people disbanded, now there's a global Animal Liberation Front that you read about in all your papers, but there is no structure to it. There is no organisation, there's no one you can write to, please come and help me, there's a goat locked up in someone's yard. No, you have to do it yourself.
The Animal Liberation Front is not an organization. The Animal Liberation Front is anybody that takes action to help animals, despite that action being classified as illegal in this day and time.
The reason that masks are worn is simply because the activists are smart enough to know that they need to live to fight another day. They don't want to be recognized by law enforcement. They don't want to be recognized on the news and by people at work. They want to be able to continue their work in the movement.
The Animal Liberation Front is the modern-day underground railroad. Just like Harriet Tubman, the A.L.F goes in, they get animals out of labs, and they put them through literally an underground railroad for animals, getting them safe vets to check them out and safe homes for them to spend their lives in.
And that means that they must not take any credit as people for their rescues. They must remain anonymous. My belief is that they're willing to serve time, that they will put their personal freedom on the line if they need to, but they're not foolish enough to just do it willy-nilly and make themselves targets.
I think that someday soon I hope, the A.L.F will be represented to be the forces that they really are, to be freedom fighters.
I don't consider myself to be anything special. I don't think anybody involved with the A.L.F is. All I want to do is avoid cruelty, and I think most people are the same.
It's in there at the same time. It does exist in people's hearts and people's minds, but as an organisation, it can never exist and it never will exist. If it did exist, the police and the FBI would bust it up, you know? And that's why they're so frustrated, because they can't stop the Animal Liberation Front, because they can't get their hands on it, you know? And there is no office, there is no structure, it's in here.
It wasn't so much the companion animals that we had that inspired me to get involved in campaigning against cruelty. It was the cruelty. It's the huge animal abuse that's taking place, you know, in the slaughterhouses, the factory farms and laboratories. That's what's incited me, that's what's encouraged me to get involved in animal abuse. And I suppose because I know that, you know, every animal is an individual and that, you know, they've got a right to a life and to be free from pain and suffering. It's not so much the consequences of my actions that cause me problems, that make me fear. It's not doing anything. If I didn't do anything to help these animals out, you know, that's what would keep me awake at night.
Oh my God!
I was quite offended by the cruelty. I was offended that that's how I'd been brought up. You know, to believe that it was all nice and cosy when in fact it wasn't. You know, the reality is something very different. I've written many letters to MPs and got nowhere with them. And we all try, we all desperately want to change the world legitimately, legally, but it just doesn't work like that. The people that run the country, they have shares, they have investments in pharmaceutical companies, for example, who are experimenting on animals. So to think that you can write to these people and say, look, we don't like what you're doing, we'd like you to change, and expect them to do so, you know, it's not going to happen. Yeah, I've just had a copy of the video from the farm. Awful. I've spoken to Trading Standards today. They're just not interested. They've been there. They said they've given the place a clean bill of health. Basically, they don't think there's anything wrong. There's nothing illegal. They said to me it's a trade-off if we want cheap eggs. That's their attitude. Same with the RSPCA. They're just not interested. Now, the advice I've got is that there are a lot of laws being broken here, but these people just don't care. So I think we need to get together and sit down and have a talk about where we're going to go next with this. We've seen what actions have been effective in this country over years to highlight issues of animal cruelty and to bring an end to animal cruelty issues. And it's the direct action that's working constantly. It's taking control, it's taking some personal action to make a difference. For example, rescuing an animal that's kept in a cage.
The activity here, especially on the West Coast, was a little bit modeled after the UK.
Animal rights protesters have broken into another research unit controlled by Oxford University.
I was acting as a liaison between the underground and the above ground. You know, people ask me a lot of times, how were these places picked? How were the targets selected? And basically, you can go into any animal laboratory and you'll find that the same problem exists.
Take a cat. Kitty, look at this. You better hope the anti-vivisection people don't get a hold of this film.
Down for a second lateral bang. That's him waving. That's his trainer who taught him how to do those tricks.
Any major university or major hospital is doing vivisection for the most part. We get a lot of money and grants doing it. They had to break the doors in to get in there, but they exposed a lot. This is where Britches came out of, UC Riverside. They were doing blind deprivation tests, eye deprivation tests that even the students were doing at UC Riverside.
His eyes were stitched shut with very coarse sewing material, and then his head was bound up.
Britches has a plastic contraption taped to his head at birth.
This little neurotic monkey who missed his mother so much.
There was a noise that was constantly piped into Britches' head. I'd listen to the tape. The tape was screeching noises, just banging noises, sharp sounds that would make anybody flinch.
The A.L.F. took him out, and eventually he ended up with a mother monkey somewhere else. What really upset me more than anything else was reading the researchers' protocols, which we did at Peter later, and learning that, of course, they could have studied blindness in human infants, but the researchers were just too damn lazy. They didn't want to drive to the homes of parents who had a blind child and work with the child. It was just too much effort for them. So it was much easier for them to break the mother monkey's heart, to ruin this infant animal's life.
I worked about 15 years in a mid-city emergency room, and one of the things that you really come in contact with all the time is pain and suffering. It's something that is very disturbing when you're actually in face-to-face contact with it, and we dealt on a daily basis with this. And it was actually during that process that I realized that human beings weren't the only individuals that were experiencing pain and suffering. And the more I learned about our relationship with animals and what we were doing with them, the more distressing it became to me that nobody was really addressing the issues of the pain and suffering of these animals, because pain and suffering is pain and suffering regardless of what sort of organism you're talking about.
Whatever your species is, whether you have a tail or not, those criteria are just as irrelevant as what your race or gender are. Because there is no good justification for our believing that we are superior to animals. Now, it's true that they can't design spaceships. It's true they don't compose sonatas. We don't run like the wind. We don't have the grace of the gazelle. We don't hear with our feet like elephants do.
I do believe that our relationship with animals, our relationship with our natural world, is going to have a profound effect upon our ultimate fate.
And when we take that next qualitative leap in our own thinking and our own moral evolution, then we will see that we have evolved.
call us terrorists, but nobody in our movement has ever hurt a living thing. Most of my friends I know have been in prison, some 3 or 4 times, but they never give up. I've had my grandson in jail, I've been to jail, my daughter's been twice in jail, my youngest daughter. I couldn't live with myself if I just lived here and, you know, didn't try to change things. I spent half my life feeling such pain for the animals and the other half such hate, because it's the hate that people can make money out of suffering, you know, innocent creatures that have never hurt us, and that we've got a government that calls itself civilised and we're the enemies. Nobody in our movement has ever hurt a living thing. We've had 4 of ours get killed. One was my beautiful daughter. Was rent and run up. She always put hands up like that, and she'd always be took away by a copper.
We put our lives on hold for this, and we will be until it stops.
Even if someone gets hurt?
Yes. Someone will eventually get hurt.
Oh Lord, how many times will I die? With every heartache, tear that I
lovely human being.
Will I find my path? Oh Lord, how hard I try. How many times will I die?
And she didn't deserve to die.
Oh Lord, how many songs?
We were all pushed behind this barrier of police, and the lorries would come in and it all went quiet. And somebody said, "There's somebody under a lorry." I knew it was Jill.
Listen to the wind. If you listen to the voice inside, you will not have to ask me again.
The animal liberation movement is a compassionate movement. It's made up of people who really care and who are very willing to put their lives and freedom on the line to save animals. Unfortunately, those people that are torturing animals or that are fighting for laws to keep animals exploited are violent. And we've seen that when they've hurt and killed other human beings in the movement. I read a book called Free the Animals by Ingrid Newkirk. It hit me so hard. It was so fascinating to learn about the early days of the Animal Liberation Front and to read about the individual struggles of those men and women who put their masks on in the middle of the night and go and save those animals that are being tortured and commit acts of sabotage and break the law to help animals.
My decision to engage in serious criminal activity was a conscious decision I made as an individual solely because I felt that the consequences were acceptable.
Rod Coronado is an important individual in the animal liberation movement because he's done so many things to bring awareness about the plight of animals. he started Operation Bite Back, which was years of animal liberations, economic sabotage, which really brought forth the atrocities that occur in laboratories, to animals in vivisection, fur farms, all kinds of animal exploitation.
The chances of dying in an auto accident are much greater than that being captured doing a hunt sabotage or an animal liberation. And every day we take those risks knowingly and unknowingly, but yet are hesitant to do the risks that matter the most to our conscience and ourselves and our future. It's Earth First in Sabino Canyon, Tuesday morning. We're on top of the hunters. We will not let them move forward without a fight. What has most pushed me to making the decision to engage in direct action has been just knowing that if we do not take action, nobody's going to hear the cries of these animals, nobody's going to see the destruction of this earth, nobody's going to hear about what is happening.
Better switch your camera off.
Here is a father and two sons and two other people who are shooting prairie dogs, potentially illegally, directly towards and hence over the railroad tracks, which I believe is illegal. So we're here to document that. They don't like being watched. Our sole objective in the campaign that I was convicted for was to prevent the mink farm industry from increasing its efficiency.
Well, they've bitten you 3 times to hear that neck pop. It feels so good.
I was never any good at breaking their necks, so we do it with electric. Put one clip right on their genitals, and the other clip on their ear.
Our actions against Michigan State University were also, in our minds, necessary because the fur farm industry was an industry that was completely legal. It had no humane standards. There was no licensing. It was simply an industry that was allowed to self-govern itself. And so, of course, in such an atmosphere, there was incredible cruelty. After witnessing the atrocities that I have on fur farms, I had to do everything that I personally could do to stop it. I looked at the industry from the perspective of somebody who had just finished a 1-year undercover investigation of it. I identified half a dozen targets that I thought were crucial to its further propagation, and we neutralized those targets. I would love nothing more than to just rescue animals from places of abuse. But in this capitalist-driven society, just because animals go missing does not mean that they're not going to be replaced. All that a researcher has to do is get on the phone to Charles River and order some more research animals, and they'll be there within a week. So it was because of that that we started employing arson.
I do believe in the here and now that animals must be rescued, must, have their pain alleviated. I mean, if, for example, there was, an adult abusing a child, we would remove that child. We wouldn't accept any reasons or excuses for that. And I just use the same theory, the same tactic to animals. In my view, laws are not set in stone, and laws throughout the decades have been altered by public consensus, public protest, and I don't believe that you can ever challenge a law without the use of direct action. In the mid-1990s, I was part of an operation against an abattoir, a slaughterhouse in the west side of the country, which involved firebombing of 12 vehicles, including delivery vans and individual cars. We also broke into the abattoir itself and set fire to the interior of the premises. And I was arrested and charged and imprisoned for that offence. If you're doing arson, you have to be very careful to minimise all the risks associated. Preparation and reconnaissance took us about a month and a half, 2 months. A lot of surveillance had to be done on the place to ascertain there'd be no humans or animals in the area.
It's very easy to prevent human fatalities when carrying out direct action.
So we checked the interior and exterior doors, the roofs, possible places of entry and exit.
For every direct action that has ever been taken, there are probably half a dozen that were not taken because of the threat to human or animal life.
We deliberately created fuses that would ignite while we were still there, so we had an element of control over the situation before we left. In this case, the implications of actually rescuing farm animals is immense, simply because of where to put them, if nothing else. But if you close the slaughterhouse down, and you would do for a few months at least, and their premiums shoot up through the roof, and so it becomes much more of an expensive business. So the profit they're making from killing animals in the first place can either be tempered or sometimes countered by economic sabotage. So the money they're making from animals is no longer cost effective. So in that respect, damage was done, and so I consider that a successful operation.
You have to ask yourself, why are some of these groups going to these extremes? And I think in general, when you feel as an individual that you can't get your message out, that nobody's listening, that you're not treated with any seriousness when you raise an issue, you're going to get frustrated. And that frustration is going to lead to something else.
Repeatedly in the last 20 years, I've seen coverage of environmental issues and animal abuse issues only because somebody broke the law and exposed them.
A lot of the high-profile campaigns, certainly from the 80s onwards, were born as a result of the animal rights direct action movement, whereby the A.L.F, for example, broke into laboratories and brought out footage and documents and brought it to the public attention.
The media owes it to American citizens to show them what is really going on in the laboratories. If there's nothing wrong with it, why is it so hard to get the images on camera? Why is it so impossible to show these images in mainstream television? If there's nothing wrong with it, what are they hiding?
When you drive by UCLA or Cedars-Sinai, those pretty walls there and the lawns, behind that, the horrors do take place.
It's very interesting when you arrive at any facility or a particular location where animals are being exploited for any reason, whether it's in entertainment or for the production of Premarin or for food or testing. People are immediately suspicious when a new person arrives, and they generally do question. I was certainly asked when I worked in a laboratory if I was an animal rights activist, and it actually came out more like a statement. We know you're an animal rights activist. And I think that's just commonplace. People know that they have to be careful in letting their little dirty secret out because people are watching. To obtain a position in any given field as an investigator, the easiest course is always the best, and there's no need to fabricate information on a resume, at least in my experience. I omitted that I worked for PETA, certainly, because nobody's going to be letting PETA come in the door. I believe my title was an associate technician when I was hired, and I had access to all the animals in the lab for the most part, and did a lot of cage cleaning, and it really didn't take very long before I was helping to hold the animals for dosing and restrain them for some of the more painful, terrible procedures.
Do you want to grab the front end and I'll grab the back end? That's what we did yesterday.
Testing methods are sort of confined to a handful of well-known tests. Oral gavage, where a tube is shoved down a throat. Nasal gastral, where the tube is shoved up into the nose. And dermabrasion substances applied on top of the animal's skin after it's been shaved and abraded. Substances can be put into the eyes, up the rectum, into the vagina, injected intravenously, and inhaled. And some of the worst tests to see are soft, fluffy little white rats that are shoved into containers the size of a hairspray can, and they're left just hanging there, sometimes for more than a day, inhaling some toxic substance.
I used to inspect laboratories for the government in the United States, and I can tell anyone who has any doubts at all that in some of the best laboratories I went into, I found beagles with their intestines on the floor left overnight when a surgical wound had become open. I found animals who had puppies stuck in their birth canal and had been left there to die. I found chimpanzees, infants, kept in cages so small that they couldn't even extend their arms over their heads. And those were in whitewashed, walled rooms with not a thing for them ever to see or do. So I also know, because I have spoken to so many scientists, so many researchers, so many physicians, that animal research is just a big business. And that unless you tap someone on the shoulder and say, look lad, you've been doing this for 14 years, you haven't discovered anything, time to look at something more modern and up to date than force-feeding an animal, they'll carry right on doing it.
Some of the substances that we were dosing animals with had name brands written on them already. We all knew a bunch of people who were already taking these products and drugs and had been for a number of years. So what's up with the animal testing going on now when we have people that are already taking these drugs? While there were so many animals that I wish that I could have gotten out that I really got close to during my 8 months there, if I could have saved anybody, boy, I wish I could have saved James. James was a primate that was so unlike the other primates in a lot of respects. The animals, the primates that are there, some are bred either nationally or internationally, and some are actually still wild caught. He came from China through a broker in North Carolina, ended up at the lab, and immediately the first time I met him when I went into clean, I knew he was different than all the other primates. He just really connected with me, and I connected with him. And I remember that day feeling, when I left work that day, like I finally had a friend in the laboratory, which probably sounds corny on some levels, but the other primates are obviously terrified, and James was too, but the other primates would run to the back of the cage and shriek and try to get away from people. And as soon as I just gave James a few seconds of my attention outside of his cage, he just reached out for me right away. It was as if he was really accustomed to people. Over the course of the next several weeks, I really spent a lot of time, as much as I could, with a busy workday with him, and he would eat orange pieces out of my hands, and on more than one occasion when I was kneeling in front of him, he would reach out and start grooming my eyebrows and sort of tugging out the bonnet over my hair because he wanted to, you know, perform what his species perform, which is the natural grooming of family members. His behavior changed so radically when the testing started. When he was first acclimated to the ECG board, he became much more submissive and fearful, and as the weeks progressed, it was harder and harder to get him to even focus on me. He would be sort of scattered and looking around at different things. Because certainly I was a person that compromised his trust after that point. I looked like every other technician who came in and did terrible things to him. But when I see him, it is striking to me how profound this relationship was with this little guy. And while there were so many animals that I wish I could have gotten out,
My name is Dr. Jerry Vlasic, and I'm a trauma surgeon working in the Los Angeles area. My job is to take care of patients that come into a major trauma center that have been injured, maybe in a major car accident, or perhaps have been shot or stabbed. As a physician practicing on the front lines in the trauma centers of Los Angeles, I can tell you that I see a lot of suffering every day. I see people suffering from their injuries, I see people suffering from diseases, and it makes me more acutely aware of other suffering because animals suffer very much like human beings do. That said, I did do animal research for a year, experimented primarily on dogs. Our project was to try to develop an example of hardening of the arteries in dogs. All of our efforts to produce hardening of the arteries in dogs were frustrated because dogs are carnivores and they don't get hardening of the arteries like human beings do. We would feed the dogs pure cholesterol, and then we would scrape up the inside of their arteries and try to give them hardening of the arteries, and it just never happened. As far as I know, it hasn't ever been done today. So that was basically a year of laboratory research in my mind that was wasted. The vast majority of all animal research is never, ever useful for treating human health issues. Will never be useful because it simply doesn't apply. The physiology is so different in animals from human beings.
I haven't got the patience today, I really haven't.
Now settle down.
Oh, shut up. That's wet, I shouldn't sit back too far, it's pissed everywhere.
We always used to joke about the fact that, what are we doing with these animal studies? I mean, why are we studying animals? I mean, this doesn't tell us anything about what's going on with human beings. So there was always kind of a feeling that anyone that was doing an animal study was really sort of not really making a contribution. It was a way of maybe making a living, but it really wasn't something that we would use. I mean, I would never take a study that was done on animals and use that information to treat a patient.
No matter how many rats and mice and rabbits and dogs and non-human primates a drug is given to, ultimately it's given to that first human being. And we know that we can't really extrapolate the results from non-human animals into human animals, so whoever the first human is that takes that drug really is a human guinea pig.
I don't know any doctor that ever used, any practicing doctor that ever used information that came out of an animal study to do anything, or would use that to justify anything that he did with a patient.
In the 21st century, we have much more modern and efficacious techniques for testing drugs and for doing other medical research.
Oh, shut up. It's wet, I shouldn't sit back too far, it's pissed everywhere. You've had your shot, fucking sit still.
Somebody's helping.
It's ridiculous to think that we're depending upon a research method, that is animal research, that might have been useful in the 1800s maybe when we were still elucidating how blood circulated. But in this day and age, we're looking at things on the molecular level and on the subatomic levels. And to think that we can do that in a mouse or a rat and then apply that to a human being is ridiculous. It just doesn't work. Major research facilities like City of Hope and Cedars-Sinai and UCLA are considered the center of medical research because of a massive public relations campaign and massive amounts of money that are pumped into these hospitals and medical centers by pharmaceutical companies and with research grants. It turns out that when a researcher applies for a grant, and all researchers apply for grants because that's the only way they can stay in their positions, when they apply for a grant from, say, the National Institute of Health, for instance, that money comes in, half that money goes straight into the hospital. They can use that to pay the janitors, they can use that to pay the rent, they can use that money any way they want to. Then the other half goes to the researcher for actual animal research or non-animal research. But unfortunately, the National Institutes of Health and other research funding organizations tend to lean towards giving more money for animal research because it produces more data and they get more publications, and they're interested in protecting themselves in a legal arena by saying, well, you know, we tested this on rabbits and dogs and cows or anything else they want to test it on, and therefore we shouldn't be held responsible when it turns out to, lo and behold, produce heart attacks in human beings like that drug Vioxx did.
Let me explain something about the City of Hope. It's the golden temple of cancer research. I lost my mother to cancer, my mother's husband, whom I absolutely adored. I lost a lot of good friends to cancer. But what they're doing there, if I took anybody from the public into this facility and you saw what they were doing to these animals, because I was the lay public at one time when I first went into these research facilities. If you looked at it, there is no way in your mind you could justify that and call it science. It's not science, it's insanity.
Ruthless, I think, is the word.
When I interviewed Bill Maher for the TV show Celebrity Justice, I learned he was a free thinker who doesn't have any fear of making controversial remarks. So he takes on issues that other people in the media are afraid to take on. And he has taken on this issue of experimentation going on at Columbia University that he says is a perfect example of unnecessary and hideously cruel animal experimentation.
Some of these experiments are having to do with finding out, you know, how bad nicotine is for you. You know, like we need to do that.
I think beagles are a common choice for animal testing because beagles are generally friendly, they're a small breed, they don't take up a lot of room, and it's really unfortunate because if you think of all the breeds of dogs, who would rather be out running around in the sunshine and sniffing grass and trees and playing than a beagle?
We had bought some ads on K-Rock, and you know, 3 or 4 companies, pharmaceutical companies, had called them and said, these people are terrorists, you have to pull the ads. And they ended up pulling the ads for the show. I never really thought about the whole thing until I've gotten into it and realizing how important money is for everything, for advertisements. And obviously we can't show any of this stuff on TV, you know, because, you know, every other commercial's for fast food or for some kind of, for the meat industry or for some new, you know, anti-allergy pill or fucking Viagra or whatever.
I don't know yet of anyone who's died from PMS. I know some people who've had PMS who've killed some people, but that's different. To me, that's a particularly weak case to be making for the torturing of little creatures.
I'm not an advocate of anything illegal. I can only, as a journalist, look at the social forces that might contribute to this kind of behavior. And I see that when the mainstream media refuses to show the images of what's going on inside laboratories and factory farms, it creates a social condition that could lead some people to extreme behavior.
Every year, a score of 1 billion animals die so we can eat their dead bodies, so we can enjoy them jumping through hoops of fire and riding toy bicycles, so we can skin them and wear them, and because our palate is trained to crave their flesh, that all we need to do is be ever so polite and patient and just practice politics, and change will come when that's never happened in any other social justice movement, hands down, in the history of the world.
Throughout our history, there have always been those who have petitioned the government and wrote letters to legislators and politicians. There have even been those who have written bills and had discussions with the leaders of the nations. These tactics alone have never worked. The only time we have seen a social justice movement prevail has been because there was pressure from more radical factions. On the night of December 16, 1773, a group of people led by Samuel Adams and Paul Revere disguised themselves as Native Americans and boarded ships containing detained tea. They threw the tea into the harbor in protest against taxation. Adams and Revere were labeled terrorists by some and heroes by others. The suffragettes would chain themselves to railings, setting fire to the contents of mailboxes and smashing windows. The suffragettes evolved into the modern-day women's liberation movement, and is the reason women are now allowed to vote and no longer considered pieces of property. In the history of the world, what all of our social justice movements have in common is that they have faced government and community repression, including arrest, imprisonment, FBI and CIA investigations. They also share the commonality of having different factions within those movements. The most compelling example being the civil rights movement, wherein we had a leader advocating illegal activity in a peaceful manner, including nonviolent direct action and civil disobedience. But we also had another leader who advocated violence and absolute abolition at all costs. It was during this passionate time in our history that the President, John F. Kennedy, stated publicly, "Those who make peaceful revolution impossible will make violent revolution inevitable." In 1960, Nelson Mandela led an organized guerrilla warfare against the white government in response to a group of peaceful demonstrators being massacred. In 1964, Mandela was convicted of sabotage and sentenced to life in prison. However, he was released in 1990. He was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in 1993. In 1994, Mandela was elected president of South Africa. A man once labeled a terrorist is now considered a freedom fighter.
I recognize that the things that I believe in very likely might take me away from being a father, from being with my son again, and I might have to go back to jail, I might be killed. But that is part of being a warrior.
If breaking the law and going to prison has to be a part of that process, then it's something you have to prepare for. As with all people fighting for a liberation struggle or for social change, you have to accept that it's part of that process, that is our job, that is our task.
I mean, Martin Luther King said all that, that you got to expect it, It's a sign of how effective you're becoming,
Like the women's movement, like those who fought against slavery, what we've done is we've made this movement, this animal liberation ethic, now become a part of mainstream society, and that's impossible to imagine that could have happened without organisations like the Animal Liberation Front and others who use direct action.
And the system ain't going to sit back and let us do it, so they are going to demonise us. There's that saying, isn't there? First they'll ridicule you, then they'll attack you, and then only after that they'll accept you. We're the same people. This is the Animal Liberation Movement. We're about love and compassion. We've got an anger, we've got an edge. But you read about us now, and they want to, they're starting to more and more, they're starting to call us terrorists.
You post on a website, or you say in a public lecture that you defend the Animal Liberation Front, that you support direct action, you are now considered to be an advocate and a voice for terrorism.
I've not done anything but have a goddamn website and a newsletter. Speech. I get 23 years in jail, possibly.
My girlfriend come back from Germany yesterday. They went to a fur demo, and on the way back they got pulled in and they were held under the Terrorism Act for 5 hours.
Let's applaud the FBI. Yay, cheer that. To cheer that is just like to spit and piss on the grave of Martin Luther King.
Throughout my years as an animal rights attorney, I've had the opportunity to meet several fabulous activists. I have met Kevin Jonas, who is the former president of SHAC, Stop Huntingdon Animal Cruelty, And I've actually represented Shaq on a few cases. I'm representing them now on a case. Kevin Jonas and other people are being federally indicted on charges coming out of the Animal Enterprise Protection Act. This is the first time anyone's been indicted under that federal act, claiming that these people are involved in a conspiracy. Recently, some FBI files were unsealed, and I was privy to them as an attorney, and read that I have been investigated by the FBI since 2001. Here is the affidavit, one of them, starting November 15, 2002, wiretapping. And this has everyone listed. I'm someone who is listed as a potential interceptor, violator. Here's where they say that my toll records were reviewed on my telephone, that my trash has been searched since 2001. Here it says that I've been placed under physical surveillance several times in Los Angeles. It discusses that I have been seen with other people during non-Title III consensual recordings. This is the National Crime Information Center, stating that there's a warning that I'm a terrorist organization member, animal rights extremist, although no prior criminal history.
We got a tip at Celebrity Justice, a nationally syndicated show, that this rock star, John Feldman, had his house raided by the FBI and local law enforcement in Los Angeles. So we interviewed him.
We were doing a home demonstration at this guy's house, who was running the shelters, the Los Angeles shelters at the time, who were killing something like 10,000 animals a month here and not educating people about spaying and neutering and not doing the right thing, just doing the cheaper thing. Save money, kill animals. We're protesting his house. I think some of the neighbors had written down license plate numbers. So because we were there, our car was parked in the street and we were doing this legal demonstration, they had written down our license plate number, and a week later, the Animal Liberation Front had spray painted something on his driveway, and essentially his house got graffitied. But because of the whole, kind of the way things are now with this eco-terrorism or, the whole Patriot Act, they got a search warrant. First thing in the morning, a judge signed it off just because they had a license plate number. I was, a suspect. But not only, they didn't just come to the house to just say, hey, were you there asking questions? They had a search warrant, and they're saying, if you don't open the door, we're going to break it through with a battering ram, which they showed me. I got home from the gym, I'm sweating from, cardio or whatever, and, next thing I know, there's 12, 14, SUVs, unmarked vehicles, 2 cops kind of get out of the car, guns drawn, put your hands on your head, get out of the car. I see this helicopter come, from behind, just like some crazy, like a Bruce Willis movie or some shit. I thought they got the wrong guy at first. I thought it was like, they thought some, drug lord or some child porn. I don't know who would have done such an atrocity to warrant all these cars and helicopters and all this crap, so if they said Mr. Feldman, I knew, well, that's me.
John Feldman and his wife Amy were both in total shock over the raid. They say that these law enforcement officials went through everything, including their underwear, and they felt very violated by that. They felt their constitutional rights had also been violated, all because Amy had picketed lawfully.
They didn't find their spray paint, after spending whatever, their $300,000 or $400,000 of tax money that I'm paying, to raid my house, and they found obviously nothing. They're obviously trying to silence me and to scare me into not speaking out for the animals and not speaking up against these huge multi-trillion-dollar companies that test on animals and kill innocent lives.
This is about more than just animal issues. It's about freedom of speech. We as Americans have a right to discuss the state of animals in this country. And it's an important issue. It needs to be discussed, and people have a right to picket lawfully.
In the end, we took them to court. We sued Santa Monica police, and we won. So here I am, and it made me, all it really made me do is just fuel the fire more.
It is just too horrific. Funny to think I trusted you. Funny to think that I have spent my whole damn life supporting you. Funny that I believed in you. It's funny I thought that you'd be there if I should ever call on you. So now I'm jaded. Friends turn to enemies. Please don't ever be
This movement is speaking up on behalf of animals who can't speak for themselves. This movement is doing something unselfish. It's doing something that other movements have never done, because this movement isn't helping the people within it. It's helping the animals.
Okay, we set out to look for the drift net fleets. We found 6 Japanese squid drift net vessels in an area due north of Hawaii by approximately 1,400 miles. And we filmed them through the night as they were taking in miles and miles of nets, observing birds and dolphins and that in the net.
As far as people being willing to, sacrifice their freedom or even risk their life to do these things, I don't see anything really unusual about that. I mean, pretty much throughout human history, people have made these kind of sacrifices, usually for less noble endeavors like real estate or people's oil wells. So I think that risking your life to protect a species is a much more noble effort.
Inflatable carries 4 police officers armed with machine guns, tear gas bombs. Over.
It's policemen. Why are they after you?
We've made it very clear to them that we have no intention of sitting idly by while they carry on with the slaughter of whales.
I think that protecting life always takes precedence over property, and it takes precedence over the law.
Sea Shepherd, this is the coastal vessel. You are under arrest. You are under arrest.
Well, we intend to stop them from going into the ice pack. If that includes having to ram them, yes, we will. Over.
You are still under arrest. Will you please stop your engine?
Captain, this is the Sea Shepherd. Do you stop killing whales?
I'm no different than anybody else. Just made up my mind to do something. Anybody can do it. One person can make a difference. Definitely can make a difference. Together, if there were more of us doing it, we could make some real change. Real change for the animals.
Stop the suffering of these animals. These animals are suffering horrible deaths as their bodies are mutilated, their limbs are severed, their skin is burned, they're poisoned to death with these awful substances. And I think that it's incumbent upon us to say, listen, enough is enough. This is not helping humans, and it's causing an immense amount of suffering for animals.
The propaganda that's spewed by industries that exploit animals is just terrific in nature. It is fantastical. Walt Disney couldn't make up a more ghoulish picture of a person than the animal industries have of animal rights activists.
The Animal Liberation Front has never hurt a human or animal ever in any of their actions. So how can they compare this to, people that are flying planes into, buildings? How can they compare saving animals to that?
People can do so much in their everyday lives to boycott animal persecution.
We can all achieve animal liberation in our living rooms, if you like, and in our kitchen, just by taking the money away from these people that are abusing the animals. Byproducts that aren't of cruelty. If these companies aren't getting the money from us, they'll stop doing what they're doing.
I think anyone who criticizes the A.L.F. should ask themselves, what am I doing? If you decide to break the law, it's up to you. But do something. Don't just be upset about it. Get active, make it change, because it will change eventually. The only question is when, and that's up to each and every one of us.
If I could go back in time, I would do the same thing again.
If you're not going to risk your life for what you believe in, then what are you going to risk your life for?
For God's sake, get up, go out, fight, stop it. We've got to stop it.
Like anybody, I would like to live a long life. Longevity has its place. But I'm not concerned about that now. I just want to do God's will. will. And he's allowed me to go up to the mountain. And I've looked over and I've seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we as a people will get to the promised land.
Oh Lord, how many times will I die? With every heartache, tear that I cry, will I find my path? Oh Lord, how hard I try. How many times will I die? Oh Lord, how many ways will I love? Places here on earth, in the skies above. Will I find my truth? Oh Lord, will I be judged? How many ways will I love, 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 love? Listen to the bird. Listen to the wind. If you listen to the voice inside, you will not have to ask me again. Oh Lord, how many lives will I live? My soul's been busy, Lord. I got so much to give. Will I learn my lessons on, go around again? How many lives will I live? Listen to